We don't believe in a quick fix to live in a constant routine of maintenance and adjustment. Once in, you've got to keep it jumping, pumping, saying something. So before your severance, ascend to point 7. Seven's a reflection of our beliefs of histories, events, unpleasantries and pestilence, disease, insensitivity, as reference to be seen as lessons, a series of tests and a complete testament to our team and strengths, as a means of success before the team take set. I find that people really like to get it, don't they? People really love getting. Perhaps one position, however, that we could think about was that the human brain actually refuses not to get anything. Working ruthlessly and tirelessly, making sense in the best way that it can of everything that the eyes see and everything that the ears hear. And I suppose the more easily this happens, the more comfortable we are. Light is reflecting or refracting off the mirror at the moment, and it's getting into my eyes. The disposal, then, of the original narrative line, the intended purpose, frustrates and confuses many. Rather like observing a tree, suspended, floating above the ground, showing no visible roots. And talking of trees, Alberto Giacometti, I'm not sure, who I believe is a Swiss artist who focused his sculptural work primarily on the head, said, to paint a leaf, you have to sacrifice the whole landscape. It might seem like you're limiting yourself at first, but after a while you realise that having a quarter of an inch of something, you have a better chance of holding on to a certain feeling of the universe than if you pretend to be doing the whole sky. This sacrifice of the whole landscape for just a small section of a leaf reminds me of something that Anne Bogart said when she wrote about what a director has to do. And she talks about that moment where one thing in a creative process has to, there's the moment, I suppose, of solidification, the moment where you have to pin down where the play stops, and you have to try and pin down what this piece of art or what this piece of performance work is going to be. And she calls those decisions violent decisions, violent actions, because you're essentially saying that one thing is this, and then you are discarding the myriad, infinite possibilities of what it could be. I rather like the idea that theatre makers are violent in that way, rather, I suppose, than any other. Maybe that's because it makes me feel like an author, like a god. Or maybe because actually it's hugely refreshing to have the power to throw so much away, to kill my babies. Matthew Goodish, some of you may be familiar with him, was a founder member of Goat Island, Chicago-based performance company. And he writes in 39 micro-lectures in proximity of performance about reading books as a child. He used an old racing ticket as a bookmark and wrote on the back of the ticket all the books that he had read. To start with, just Treasure Island and Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Having read only the first chapter of his third book, Dracula by Bram Stoker, he saw this as a significant enough achievement to add the title to the list. Now, uninhibited by fourth title, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, after reading only the first page. Gulish says, I suspected that in my whole life I would never read past the point at which I entered the book on the bookmark, and this has proved true. A question must have occurred to me, which I could not at the time articulate, but which I now understand as this. At what point does the bookmark become the book? So let us imagine for a moment the comprehensive history of all arts practice. All the art ever made, and all the books on arts practice ever written, and all the words ever uttered around the subject of arts practice. The unobtainable everything. Now let us imagine what an individual knows, what they have seen, what they have written, what they have read about. This is their bookmark, a cobbled together set of fragments and learnings that they try to make sense of and find their own position within. It alludes to the comprehensive history, but in reality it's very specific and quite different. It signposts an inability to know everything, but nevertheless it is the individual's own history, their own book, their own practice. Michael Frayn says, when you have to describe some real thing, it always turns out to be hideously complicated. Nothing will tie together. It won't make a story. It won't make a plot. It won't tie up. And that is the difficulty of the world from the point of the writer. It isn't in its words. It's tree-shaped and cloud-shaped and room-shaped. It's not word-shaped. So our perspective of some things may change as we get to understand them better. I particularly like this anecdote about an ex-colleague of mine at Manchester Metropolitan University who spent an entire career's worth of his time being a mathematician until he realised that his work in maths was becoming so creative and artistic that it was no longer right for him to pretend not to be an artist anymore. So he changed jobs. The label didn't suit him anymore. In fact, it took science to take him to his art. So now perhaps I've put together some sort of mirror from the fragments that were lying on the floor, as I outlined. And it may be badly sellotaped and not reflecting the true image, but nevertheless it's there. And I'd like to leave you now with just one final thought, which is Matthew Gulish again, in 39 Light Collectors in Proximity of Performance, who writes this. Performance, culture, and pedagogy are three concepts into which we must find our own personal avenues. If we travel into any one of them,